Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Youkilis, and today I'm joined by my friend John Coffey in part one of his Chronicles, The Great Work. In this conversation, John explains how he navigated his awakening to the UFO ET phenomenon with the help of Whitley Strieber's work, but then how he concluded that Strieber was disingenuous. John explains that disinformation is a recurring theme in the realm of ufology and why discernment is necessary for understanding the true state of global affairs. John proposes his thesis that our world is run by a cabal of elite psychopaths that desire a one world government characterized by tyranny, control, and depopulation. John challenges whether the official narrative of virtually any topic is true and argues the cabal has created a state of perpetual fear and crisis. We discuss the role of propaganda, we question why Obama repealed the Smith-Mundt Act, and we consider the capture of our media establishment. Next, we discuss issues with music and entertainment industry and establishing false narratives. From there, we discuss Barack Obama and the Beatles as examples of wolves in sheep's clothing. We discuss the Tavistock Institute and how the countercultural movement of the 1960s was a psyop created by the CIA and other intelligence as a means to break apart the family. We consider the reality of feminism relative to its narrative and discuss how it has contributed to the destruction of the nuclear family. We discuss the economic impact of inflation and how money printing has been used as a tool to force women into the workforce. We consider the damage of social engineering and mind control and why the strength of the term mind control is appropriate. John proposes that COVID-19 was run as a military-grade mind control psychological operation. John then provides 4 historical examples of mass mind control, including the Reichstag fire in Berlin, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the JFK assassination, and 9/11. Next, we consider whether COVID-19 was a genocide and the damaging implications of the SPARS pandemic exercise of 2018. From there, we discuss finding synchronicity, awakening, and purpose, despite the baggage that comes with discussing conspiracy theories. John and I consider the malevolent force at work in the world and the dark social engineering behind the woke agenda. We then discuss whether Trump is part of the deep state and the structure of the cabal. Here I wanted to add an author's disclaimer. This episode was recorded in January of 2023. My own perspectives on President Donald Trump have evolved significantly over the subsequent 2.5 years as I re-examined geopolitical events over the past decade with fresh eyes and a recognition of how distorted my perception of Donald Trump as a political figure had been made by the legacy media. I documented this journey in episodes 76 and 77, Trump 2024, MAGA, or how I recovered from TDS. Next, John describes the failures of Operation Warp Speed and the weaponization of the term anti-vaxxer. We consider Hegelian dialectic and the illusion of choice as a means to divide and conquer. From there, John describes the great work, the multi-generational plan to consolidate world government. We discuss how central bankers have funded both sides of every war and the need to ask, cui bono, who benefits? Next, we discuss the concept of doublethink and our ability to live in cognitive dissonance. We consider whether the COVID gene therapies were ultimately a bioweapon intended to drive the depopulation agenda. I ask John's recommendations for how to go from here and fix the current system, and he explains the need to say no and to resist. We then discuss the true nature of the human spirit and that we're beings of incredible power. We consider humanity as a species with amnesia. John explains why he is pessimistic short-term, but optimistic long-term. We discuss how knowledge is the key to avoiding fear and how it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been tricked. We conclude with homework to the audience from John, challenging them to investigate the official narrative about dinosaurs and fossil fuels. Music from the show is available on the Spotify playlist Entangled The Vibes. If you like the show, please drop a 5-star review and subscribe on Substack, Spotify X, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please enjoy the episode. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Entangled. I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. John Coffey. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jordan. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, thanks. So John is actually the father of one of my lifelong friends, Zach Coffey, who was on the show a couple months ago. John reached out after he listened to that episode, and we got to talking.
and wanted to have him come on for an interview as well. So John, maybe why don't you give the folks a little bit of your background and why you wanted to come share some perspectives on the Entangled podcast?
Sure. Like you said, I am Zach's father, and I listened to your podcast. I wasn't aware that you were podcasting, and I've got to tell you, Jordan, I listened to your 3 total podcasts that had to do with the COVID narrative and things of that nature, and I was just so impressed with how thorough it was, and I couldn't have done it better myself. Basically, I'm just a citizen, I'm on Team Humanity, and I don't have any social media presence of any kind. I don't have any degrees in, areas that we might be talking about or anything like that. I do have a BA in psychology from a liberal arts college here in Ohio, but the bottom line is that in 1987, when the book Communion came out from Whitley Strieber, if you remember that, okay, it was a groundbreaking book. Basically, it's about his alleged UFO abduction, experiences, and I was no more or no less, into the UFO thing, other than perhaps seeing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, But
Sure.
he talks about this incredible experiences that he was having, and I'm reading this, and I'm like, if this is true, this is one of the biggest, issues in the history of mankind. Why isn't anybody talking about it? And it launched me into, kind of a passionate pursuit of this UFO issue. I always did really well in school. I was kind of a model student, but in my heart, I was kind of a rebel. I've always questioned things. I've always felt that, the world is not as we see it. So I owe Whitley Strieber, quite a bit in terms of, a debt of gratitude. I started 35 years ago, and I spent the first 2 or 3 years of my, quote, research, basically enmeshed in the UFO issue. And it really opened my eyes to the possibilities of what might exist out there. But it affected me in a very real way, both positively and negatively, because the ultimate conclusions that I've come with regard to Whitley, and he's very well known in this field, okay, is that actually I don't think he's genuine. And I spent a lot of time, kind of adhering to his books and his dogma and things of that nature. And what I've learned in all of this is that whether it's this or any of the other subjects that I might be, talking about today, is that there is so much disinformation out there. There is so many, agent provocateurs, things of this nature, and it's something that you just really have to be aware of. And I think, for some real con artists and grifters and stuff like that early in the game,
It's hard not to, right? I mean, that's part of how these conspiracies stay covered up so well, is that they muddy the water with all kinds of nonsense that people fall for, and then it makes it so much easier for the truth to then slip through the cracks.
Absolutely. And like any good disinformation agent, there's, I think, a lot of truth in what he says, but, they intermingle a little bit of that, or actually quite a lot. But at the end of the day, I've just kind of rejected any further study of the UFO phenomenon. It's a swamp, and I can't really come to any significant conclusions about it. And I'm just not going to look at it any longer. I think ultimately we'll find out maybe what it is or maybe what it's not. But anyway, this just has to do with my background. And then the other thing is, you spent some time with Zach talking about his brother Ryan, and Ryan had more than some. Ryan had experiences that, really fit almost perfectly into what you would call the abduction narrative. It changed him in a lot of ways, and he was very uncomfortable about it. And I thought maybe initially what I was doing was I was being led to this, or drawn to this research, so that maybe I could help him. At the end of the day, that wasn't possible. He died before we really got into that issue at all. But the bottom line is that what I'm here today to do, what my purpose is today, is to talk essentially about what I see as a major problem in the world today, of just being able to speak calmly, rationally,
Yeah.
cogently with each other, especially in light of what we're dealing with over the last 3 years. And the bottom line is, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I will be talking about conspiracies, but I do want to talk about something that I think is fairly radical in these times, and that is that let's have a discussion that is adult, sober, mature, and based on intellect and not emotion. The bottom line is, can we simply play a game of what if? An intellectual exercise. It's real difficult in these times. And in my opinion, much of the modern mainstream narrative is just based solely on emotion. And I want to talk a little bit about why that might be the case. So anyway,
that would be great.
Okay.
And I think, before we get into the topic of conspiracy theories, which is something that, I am unfortunately forced to address quite often on this podcast, as exploring the true nature of reality as part of the thesis. And when you are looking for truth, it's inevitable that you come across very real conspiracies. But nonetheless, before we talk about that, I wanted to ask a little bit more about the experiences that Ryan had, if you'd be willing to share a little more, because that's not something I knew.
Yeah. If you had a checklist for the classic abduction symptoms, as it were, in the UFO, how familiar are you with UFO abductions and the literature that surrounds it?
So, I'd say high level. Like I've consumed a good amount of Dr. John Mack's stuff.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so that's probably where my main point of reference for the abduction phenomenon.
Okay. I need to be a little bit guarded here in that Ryan was affected negatively by this and was really not very comfortable talking about it. And I don't want to dishonor his memory by going into real specifics. But the bottom line is that there is kind of a checklist of, abduction clues in your life, or, that type of thing. And they include things like, unexplained scars or marks. I mean, I'm blanking on it right now, but awakening,
like a white light floating. Those typically seem to be ones.
Things of that nature. At the end of the day, Ryan explained to me circumstances in which he was basically awakened at night on multiple occasions and heard kind of a beehive buzzing sound in the room, which has been reported many, many times. A diffuse red light in the room that he couldn't attribute a source to. He saw what he considered to be, alien entities just literally walking down the street in Wyoming. He was with a friend at the time when he was probably, I'm guessing, 12 or 13. And he strangely, again, this is sensitive, but he strangely became literally like afraid of the dark. He couldn't go into a room until it was lit. He was very uncomfortable alone. And this is just an anecdote, but he was of the age that he kind of grew up with the movie E.T.
Yeah,
and he loved that movie. And we got him this plush E.T. doll, or whatever, maybe this big. And it was in his room for a long time. And suddenly it was like, you got to get this out of the room. It frightened him.
Yeah.
And I tried to talk to him about these things. I'm not doing a very good job. And like I said, I'm trying to be a little bit guarded. But he had just a myriad of symptoms and experiences and things like this that would indicate that possibly he was involved in this phenomenon, whatever it is. I'm not saying that it's aliens. I'm not saying, I don't know what it is. And that's part of what I was talking about before. And just before he died, I took him on a trip, and we went up to my college. It's in Central Ohio. And we were just laying out in the middle of the main quad, real close, probably to about midnight. And we were just looking at the stars, and I'll be darned if something that looked like a star actually kind of moved and responded to kind of our voice. And I mean, we're talking something that's way up there.
Yeah.
And it didn't shoot across the sky. It was like it just moved rather slowly for, about the equivalent of an inch, maybe, in the sky, which would have been quite a distance. He was just a magnet for these kinds of things.
Wow.
So, and as I said, after he got sick, I certainly had many other things on my mind besides talking to you about those things.
Right.
But he left this world, I think, with no answers, and I left, and I don't have any significant answers at this point. I know all of the UFO lore, I know the players, I know the whole, all the theories and things like that, but I am not satisfied that I'm any closer to understanding this phenomenon now than I was before I started. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point you bring up, and I'd say similar experience for me. And I think the one big takeaway I've had is that it's a much more complicated phenomenon than people are prepared to believe, right? I think there's a lot of beings that are currently today interacting with our world, have been in the past. I think that there's military involvement that muddies the water as well. I think there's likely higher vibrational beings as well as lower vibrational beings involved in all this as well. So I think it's important that people practice discernment and recognize that the true nature of reality can be much more complicated than we may be thinking.
I essentially agree with all of that. And in addition to that, there is purposeful disinformation. There is purposeful propaganda, and it's got a real dark side to it, And I think the military is absolutely, intimately involved with this, and higher levels of government, higher levels of, the elites are absolutely involved with this, whatever it is. But so. Anyway, that's what got me started. And as I said, ultimately taught me a lot of lessons about acceptance of what's presented to you. And the word you just used, discernment. Discernment is required in all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And I think, I've got a few things to say with regard to that. But one thing I did want to talk about real quickly is that, again, I am not a scientist. I don't have any degrees in this area. I'm just somebody that's been literally obsessed for 35 years in all areas of alternative thought. The nature of reality, you name it. I mean, just you name it. Anything that can be labeled, kind of as your standard conspiracy theory, and a lot of others. And I wanted to comment that anything I say today is strictly my opinion. It's my beliefs. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I want to talk about actually some tangential subjects related to these things, but I really want to talk about the issue of why can't we just talk with each other? You know what I mean? Because for the last 3 years, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room, is COVID. I don't know how. It's okay to talk about that issue on this.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, on this podcast, you obviously went into great detail.
The dying breath of free speech, but whatever, going down with the fire, right?
Absolutely. And so I wanted to start with that comment that I consider myself extremely well-versed, extremely knowledgeable about many subjects, but I don't have a website. I don't have a podcast. I have no social media of any kind, and that's on purpose. It's for a number of reasons, but I think social media is at the heart of a lot of issues we've got anyway, and I avoid it, and I just don't have any of those types of things, with regard to connection to, the grid, as it were, as much as I can possibly do so. So. What I wanted to do was just state kind of a main thesis that kind of illustrates my view of the world and where I operate from.
That'd be great.
And I think it's something that you've already talked about. I've heard you use this term yourself, and the beliefs, the opinions that I have are, again, really based on a ton of research. All right. It is not just, a fly by night type of thing. But my main thesis regarding the world at large is that our world is run by a very small cabal of psychopaths, elite criminals that hold an agenda that can basically be broken down into two simple elements. The first one is that they desire and are actively pursuing a one world government of total tyranny and control, a 1984 style world of total surveillance, track and trace, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The second major agenda that I believe that they are pursuing is depopulation. Period. End of story. Yeah. And there are many, many areas that are subgroups and subcategories within this type of outlook. But the bottom line is that we've got a malevolent force that is in control of reasonably every single institution in this world. I think you might agree with that. And we're talking about politics, the economic system, education, banking, medicine, the narrative on history, science, entertainment, and perhaps most importantly, the media. So my purpose for today is just to look at a few historical and present day events that ask this simple question. Does the official narrative about any of these events ring true and frankly even make sense?
Yeah.
So can we instead play the simple game of what if, making the argument that the official stories surrounding these events serve the agendas that I've just talked about, the first two agendas I've just talked about, and are in fact not, in many cases, even germane or even conform in any way to the stated official narrative that surrounds these types of events. Is it possible, is what I'm asking. Is it reasonable to conclude that the official narrative about virtually any, and I mean that, virtually any issue, event, or institution is in fact an outright lie, and it exists only to serve the agendas that I spoke about previously? Now, this is a huge statement, and I realize that, and when we're finished here today, I am simply asking the listener to consider, is this possible? Based on what you hear from me, is this reasonable? Can I look at this thesis calmly, rationally, as an adult, and simply determine whether it has any merit whatsoever? Okay. And again, in this day and age, having these types of discussions is really difficult. It really is. Everything is so emotion laden, so emotionally driven that it is difficult, and it's, in my opinion, by design. It's on
I agree. And
purpose.
I was just going to hop in with that, right? As you mentioned earlier, that their control of the media has been this cabal's kind of main source of power and control, right? And they know what the lowest, weakest emotions of the human being is, right? And they know how to play on that perfectly, divide and conquer, right? It's the trick in the book.
In addition to that, I agree with you 100%. And so much of these events and narratives and things like this are designed to do really initially just one thing, and that's to place us in a state of perpetual fear. And from a state of perpetual fear, there's tons of studies that show that our rational thinking is the first thing that goes out the window. Fight or flight brings about, emotionally survival based kind of a mindset, and the ability to think rationally and look at things from an objective perspective is one of the things that's lost initially. And so it's my argument that, I'm sure you understand this, that, we're perpetually in a state of crisis. Whether take COVID out of the picture for a minute, there's always a war. There's always a threat. We're going to be hit by an asteroid. It's always fear, 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 fear. And at the end of the day, I'll talk a little bit about this, but at the end of the day, it is a very well organized agenda of full spectrum fear that is actually military grade. It's military grade, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. Now, before we talk about any of these issues, I think the first thing that I really wanted to look at is that is the issue of perception. Okay. Perception is, in my opinion, everything. I think most people would think that they make decisions based on, empirical data, and they're rational, and they do all of these types of things before they form an opinion about something. But I think that the bottom line is that if we really think about it, there are very, very few things that we know for certain empirically. Virtually everything that one believes to be true, the entirety of one's belief about the world in total, is based almost solely on perception. And this isn't a particularly groundbreaking perspective, no pun intended, but people don't think about this. Perception is everything. And I don't know if you've ever listened to a podcast by a gentleman that goes by Crow 777. Have you ever heard of him? Okay, I can really recommend him. We can talk a little bit more about him in a minute, but he opens every show with kind of a mantra, and that mantra is belief is the enemy of knowing. Okay. And simply put, that means that defending what you feel to be true and whatnot from the point of view of saying, I know this is a fact, is applicable very, very rarely. 2 + 2 = 4 is something I'm pretty comfortable in saying that I know. It'd be hard to, take me off that position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But my views on the world, my views on, the cabal I just stated and things like that are based, solely on my perception of the world. So the bottom line is, we have to be incredibly discerning. We have to understand the sources that we are drawing our conclusions from. Can we trust these sources, et cetera, et cetera? Discernment, as I already said, is the key, to everything. And the first thing to understand is that you are potentially being influenced. Where's your perception coming from? Day to day, is our perception influenced? You know what I mean? And it is. I'm sure you would agree with this, that in 1,000 different ways, our perception of the world is being manipulated every single day. All right. From something that's, benign, perhaps in its own most basic form, advertising. Advertising works, or they wouldn't continue to use it. They wouldn't continue to spend millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads and things of that nature. We buy based on emotion, and we justify our purchases through intellectual, defense. Okay, but we buy emotionally. And that's something that I've been in sales all my life, and it's a fundamental understanding of how people purchase and buy, is they buy based on emotion, and advertising is appealing to that particular part of our psyche, and is absolutely manipulating us. But there's a much darker agenda to these types of things. Political propaganda is absolutely an influence in our lives, and a lot of, we are propagandized in this country to believe that we're the good guys. We've got the white hats, and it's the rest of the world, so to speak, that is the enemy, and they're the bad people, and they propagandize their citizens, but we don't receive propaganda from our government. I don't know if many people are aware of this, but are you aware of what was known as the Smith-Mundt Act that was repealed by Obama?
I'm not.
Okay, basically at the end of World War II, I don't know the specifics of why this came to a head, but Congress actually passed a law, a bill that made it illegal for our government to propagandize us. And you wouldn't think that would be necessary, but they did. And during the Obama administration, they actually repealed that act. In other words, they made it legal for the government and the media and whatnot to propagandize, U.S. citizens. And you have to ask yourself, why would they do that unless their ultimate goal is, they are going to propagandize us? You know what I mean?
Or, and they have been doing it, and now they're just doing it legally.
That's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. Media propaganda comes in so many different forms. I would argue literally that the mainstream news media the old school news media is literally nothing more than a propaganda arm of our government. And whether it's, the Fox News side of things or the CNN side of things, you're being propagandized, and you are being driven to or influenced to come to decisions that has never been more apparent than in this area, or in this era, of COVID. I've never seen anything that has split opinions so radically and so firmly. You're in this camp or you're in this camp, and any discussion otherwise is met with a whole host of problems. The bottom line is that our media is captured. It's corrupt. It's a shill for the official narrative, and it is one of the major perceptual influences on our life, and in my opinion, in a very, very negative way. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But the other issue that is involved here is entertainment. Movies, television shows. Unfortunately, the music industry, which is something that I didn't mention this, but I'm a lifelong drummer, a musician, and I've got a lot of heroes, or I did, and I don't know if you're familiar with any of the work that was done by Dave McGowan. Have you ever heard of the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon?
Dave McGowan sounds familiar. I don't know that book though.
Okay. You are kind of a music guy, right?
Yeah.
It's a big part of your life.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm on the edge. I was born in 1959. So I was a little young for the music of the 60s at the time, but not completely. But the 70s, I was still listening to, all the classic stuff. And if you take a look at this issue of how music is used and how movies are used to propagandize us, to steer us toward particular narratives, it's incredible. If you if you want to look at that type of issue, you can look at a groundbreaking book by a guy named Dave McGowan called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, which is an exploration of all the major 60s and early 70s artists. And when you start to look at it, every single one of them has military intelligence, family, military background. It's unbelievable. But my point today is not to get real deep into any of these issues specifically, but just to talk about the general overview of certain things.
And I think just if I could hop in real quick.
Sure.
I'm glad you bring up that point about lost heroes, because I've had that same issue, right, in my journey, is just learning how deep this cabal has extended their reach, and all these people that I once looked up to. And obviously I don't think it's universal, but I think it's a lot closer than it is to non-existent, right? That the people that we see in the media all the time are not who we thought they were, right? And I think Obama, as you mentioned, is a perfect example for me. I mean, he was the guy who got me super excited about politics. I joined Students for Barack Obama when I was at Indiana University. I thought he was this, liberal bastion and was helping to end all the centuries of racial injustices. And then you look at the actual policy outcomes, you look at some of the things that the WikiLeaks emails exposed, and you're like, no, he was just part of this entire establishment like the rest of them.
Absolutely. His background is almost, indiscernible. It has this unbelievable ring of falsity to it, in terms of his, upbringing, where he went to school. Did he go to these places? Did he graduate from these places? Obama's a great example, and to have to kill your heroes is something that unfortunately is necessary, I think, in this world. It is. And I've had to kill the Beatles, the greatest band of all time, so to speak, and just somebody that I was was a major part of my life. There's a million, but the bottom line is they were involved with some very dark and occult type issues and social engineering. The bottom line is social engineering, directly and indirectly through what's known as the Tavistock Institute, if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of that a few times, but I don't know much about it. If you wouldn't mind diving in a little there.
Sure. The Tavistock Institute is technically kind of an NGO, but it is by far the dominant purveyor of social engineering in the world. It's an English entity, all right, and it is an entity that really only is concerned with one thing, and that is influencing the mass public at large. And in my view, that being the case, they are directly tied to this, satanic evil cabal, for lack of a better term. And so what they do is really, really quite negative. Without going into it too much, it's been shown pretty clearly by McGowan to begin with, and then a number of fantastic researchers afterwards, that the whole counterculture movement of the 60s was nothing but a social engineering platform plan that was set out by the Tavistock Institute, the CIA, intelligence agencies in general. And it was at the end of the day, the main purpose of that whole thing was to begin to break apart the family.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
You tie in feminism at the time, things of that nature. Feminism on the face of it, how can you argue with it? Women have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Enslaved, reduced to second class, subjugated. That was the word I was looking for. Thank you. Throughout history, and freedom for, or equality for women is, on its face, is a great thing. But at the end of the day, the results of this cultural engineering from the 60s, feminism, and so on, has really led to, among other things, a significant breakdown of the nuclear family in this country. And we can get into that just a little bit more.
And I think too, you think about the feminist movement, right, and how employment, right, equal employment has been a big push of that movement. And obviously that, on the face of it makes total sense, right? Women should have every opportunity as men in the workforce. But what that's also been used is, to me, it feels like a Trojan horse to make the cost of living increase over and over, and force families now to have two full-time workers, when that didn't used to be the case, right? It's just having us build our own enslavement in a sense.
That's a great point. There is no realistic expectation these days among the nuclear family that the father's gonna work, the mother's gonna be the parent, gonna be the nurturer. It's just assumed anymore that both parents are going to be working, and the negative impacts that has on the children that are part of these families is just deep, untold. It is many, and it's a significant problem. It's a significant problem. The getting back to those are some great points, and again, without going into any real detail, understanding that social engineering is an insidious, often subtle, very well planned, organized, and conducted by these intelligence agencies, among other things. And what it has done to American society, to the world society, is, at the end of the day, amazingly destructive. And it's been done, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, on purpose. And there's, we'll get into why that's the case maybe in just here in a moment. But I wanted to give you an example just in my own life of something that, affected me from the perception, or from the point of view of having some perceptual influence placed on me. And this was when, you talk with Zach a lot about his brother Ryan, and, we lost Ryan 10 years ago this year. And I can't believe it's been that long. But when he was first diagnosed, we were told by the medical professionals that, we're freaking out. Ryan had a a tumor in the brainstem area of his brain. It's known as diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, DIPG for short, and it's a fairly rare affliction. Okay, it normally affects much younger. He was 26 when he got it, and it's normally attacks 6, 7, 8 year olds. It's a a young child's disease, but the bottom line is that it's in a terrible area of the brain. It's inoperable. The brain stem controls our autonomic nervous system, our involuntary, processes within the body, and operating in that area is out of the question. It would essentially more than likely be fatal. But when this diagnosis was made, my family, Judy and I, and whatnot, are quite alarmed, and to say the least, right? And we asked the doctors and nurses and specialists and whatnot, can you do anything for us? Can you help? And they said, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Additionally, they're talking to me now and to my wife, do not get on the internet and look for information about this particular form of cancer. And I didn't. This was back when I was a little more trusting of the medical industry,
sure,
compared to today.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, the reason they were doing that is that Ryan's affliction was it is the whole DIPG is essentially 100% fatal. It's a death sentence. Okay, and they, maybe with good intentions, they were telling us not to go look, because that would be what we would find out, that we're in real trouble here, and so I didn't. And again, they may have been doing it from a place of love. They may have. I believe that the people at Children's Hospital and the other specialists that Ryan dealt with were genuinely caring and heartfelt people. They really were. But it's possible. I don't know for sure, but it's possible I may have looked for alternatives. We may have gone outside the box, to say the least, to look at other forms of treatment that might be effective for Ryan. I'm talking about all kinds of different things. We don't need to get into that. But at the end of the day, we stuck with traditional chemotherapy and things of this nature, radiation, and he died in less than a year. The point I'm making here is I was influenced, in a specific way that is related to what's going on in today's world. Okay, we are the experts. When we're talking about COVID as an example, our narrative is the only narrative that you can follow. And frankly, any dissenting opinion is not only, frowned upon. People are being attacked, literally censored. Censorship is unbelievable, and so on and so forth. And I think Ryan would have died anyway. I do. So that's the way that goes. But the point is that, I saw it in action in my own life. But anyway, I think the bottom line is that unless we are going to be intellectually dishonest with ourselves, we have to understand these two basic facts. We have perceptions of the world. We have beliefs of the world based on our perception, and our perception, what's most dominant in our life, where we get our information, is what's going to lead ultimately to our conclusions. I believe that the mainstream narrative, not only about COVID but about everything, is very dark and very nefarious. I really do. And therefore, if you are only getting your information from these types of sources, it's naturally understood that you're going to have perceptions that are in line with the what they're looking to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I want to take it a step further and say that at the end of the day, it's literally my assertion that we are under mind control. You're mind controlled, Jordan. I'm mind controlled. All of the populace is mind controlled, and it's literally birth to death. It's a full spectrum attack. If you did a poll on the street, I would venture to guess that essentially 99% of the people that you poll would say, not only am I not mind controlled, hell no, I'm not mind controlled. I think for myself, man. I make my own decisions. I am not in any, maybe advertising influences me, but to use the word mind control, that's very strong. That's very strong. And I think that there's a generally, on purpose, a general understanding of the base of the public that mind control is Manchurian candidates. It's people, that extreme type of mind control.
And I like you bring this up because Kathy O'Brien talks about this too, and she really talks about it as a spectrum, right? There's the one end where it is the propaganda that you and I are subjected to every day from morning to birth in such subtle ways that we don't even recognize it. And that's kind of your baseline mind control. And then that goes up all the way up to some pretty dark stuff that, is going on in MK Ultra and the like.
The issue of, the type of mind control that MK Ultra is what we're talking about here, as a general umbrella, with Kathy O'Brien is, an unbelievably dark and multifaceted rabbit hole that plays an unbelievably important part of our society. Her story is unfortunately one of, I believe thousands of individuals within the entertainment industry, within the music industry in particular. We can get into that just a little bit, but the odd behavior of people such as Britney Spears or Katy Perry or Kanye, whatever, just historically, is an indication that this is being done at a mass level, and I can't even begin to understand the trauma that Kathy O'Brien went through. I'm assuming then that you've read Transformation of America.
I haven't read it, but I've seen some other interviews with her.
Okay, so you're pretty familiar with it, and there are many different outcomes that this program is looking for when we're talking about these individual on the individual level. She was a presidential level mind-controlled sex slave, or a beta sex slave as they are often called, but this program is used for again all types of things, including Manchurian candidates and things of this nature, and it is tied to issues of unbelievable darkness, pedophilia, Satanism, outright enslavement of humanity, specifically to you just had the last podcast you just posted talking about 8 million children currently in captivity, so to speak, and it's an unbelievable problem. There's a lot of theories about why that is the case, and I've got some thoughts about that I really don't want to attack today, but the bottom line is that mind control is used on the general public at large, very specifically and very scientifically. Something that you might find interesting is that there is a CIA handbook that deals with specific torture and coercion of of prisoners of war. Okay, and it is known, generally speaking, as Biderman's chart of coercion. And there are basically 10 tenets to this program. And I would recommend very much that if you want to understand this issue in a general sense, you can listen to a podcast called Macroaggressions. Charlie Robinson is the host of that podcast. Perhaps you could, you've got my notes. Perhaps you can put that in the show notes here and stuff like that, because I want to reference a couple of different podcasts that might be helpful. But the bottom line is,
put them all in the show notes. That'd be great.
Okay, it's from 12/16 of this year, so just a couple weeks ago. Okay, and it's called How to Manufacture a Pandemic. But what he's talking about is the fact that from the beginning, COVID was operated as and conducted as a military-grade mind control psyop. Okay, there's going to be people out there that, we've already talked about this. This is a very divisive issue, and I want to come back quickly to the issue of playing what if. If this is triggering you, if you are listening to me right now saying this person is crazy, this is nuts, and you're on the side of basically complying with and agreeing with the official narrative of COVID, I'm not trying to change your mind right now. What I'm trying to do is ask you to just play a little bit of an intellectual game. Take a look at this. And if you decide that I'm completely nuts, so be it. I just wanted to reinforce that point because we're getting into something that's pretty dark and pretty specific. Specifically, Biderman's chart of coercion begins with, and we're talking about individual prisoners of war at this point, okay? But if you apply it to society as a whole, the first tenet of this chart of coercion is isolation. Does that sound familiar? You know, were we not isolated? The second item on this, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the second item on this chart of coercion is control perception. It's listed right there, okay? How many ways have we seen our perception being controlled during this, this pandemic? Censorship in the United States of America in direct violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution that was put there for exactly this reason is unbelievable. It's rampant and widespread, and it is being allowed by the mass majority of our population, because at this point they're not censoring issues that they're concerned with. At the end of the day, they're going to come for everybody. They are. So to censor me at this time, as an example, sounds great, when you're not in alignment with me, but wait till they come for you. The bottom line is we understand this completely, you and I know. The First Amendment is an incredibly important, aspect of our allegedly free society, and it is being violated illegally, against our Constitution on a daily basis. You know what I mean? On a daily basis. It's unbelievable. So the bottom line is that, in my opinion, the government has used military-grade mind control against all of the world, frankly, during this pandemic. Is it possible? Is it reasonable that there's a direct link supporting mind control that has to do with something else that I wanted to talk about? And this is this phenomenon of extreme anger when individuals are presented with an idea that falls outside of their current paradigm. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you've experienced this. Why is it that so many people seem to feel that their literal concept of self as a human being is being attacked when someone simply offers an alternative view to their own? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I have for sure.
Is there division within your family or your friends and stuff like this that has literally led to estrangement through anger because of positions you might hold? I'm just asking. You don't have to get in.
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I can necessarily point to anything directly, but I'm sure it's coming. It's definitely been that's definitely been one of the hardest parts of starting this podcast is, you put some of these ideas out there. Obviously they either resonate or they absolutely don't. So
yeah, in a very specific way. There's almost no middle ground,
Yeah, exactly.
One of the podcasts that I listen to quite often that I really enjoy, and I love the name of the podcast, is simply "My Family Thinks I'm Crazy" podcast. That's what the title is, and a lot of my family thinks I'm crazy. And but beyond that, across the world, one of the prevalent themes and dominant issues that has come about because of what's gone on with regard to COVID is that I've lost members of my family. I've lost, not to death, I'm talking about we are estranged. My best friends for years, we no longer speak. It's been amazing. And what I'm trying to suggest here is that possibly I haven't been able to pinpoint specifically the tactic that's been used, but I think it's something that's been a long game. It's been going on for a long time. What has been used to create this effect? But I would argue that it's intimately tied to mind control. Okay, and all I'm asking is I'm asking listeners to examine this within themselves. If they feel that this dynamic has presented itself, in their past, have we? I can't imagine that you haven't been in a situation where you're trying just to have a rational conversation, and the other person immediately becomes angry, seeing red, and it's gone. You're done. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think it's been part of the agenda to make certain topics like politics, like corruption, these taboo subjects that you can't bring up, right? Because that just helps to create that perpetual self-censorship cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in my lifetime, 9/11 in a certain sense, but COVID is the most divisive issue outside of, whatever medical issues are at hand that I have experienced in my lifetime. And I want so from here, what I wanted to do is we need to talk about COVID maybe at the end. We do. A lot of people have COVID fatigue, though, I'll tell you, and myself included. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to take a few historical examples of mind control that might have been used to serve a particular agenda. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. And what I'm asking people to do is just decide, themselves what your conclusions are with regard to whether or not these false narratives served the agendas that I was talking about before. So I'm just going to go through four real quick, and we're not going to go into detail, but just four historical examples of possible mass mind control that have served, in my opinion, the agendas that we've talked about earlier. Okay. Now, many times these narratives, these psyops, whatever you want to call them, they address and they attack multiple agendas. There's lots going on in a lot of cases, okay? But we're going to start first with the 1933 Reichstag fire in Germany. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yep, I am definitely. I think one of the most often pointed to false flags for sure.
Exactly. And the reason I bring it up, if anybody's not familiar, the bottom line is that I believe it was 1933, the equivalent of the Capitol building, the Reichstag in Germany was burnt to the ground almost. And it was blamed on anarchists. It was blamed on opposition to the rising National Socialist Party, which is the Nazis, right? It has been proven. It's inarguable. You cannot argue that it was absolutely 100% a false flag. All right. The Nazis set the fire themselves. They blame the anarchists. But as a result, a very dark agenda was fulfilled. And that's the rise and the installation of the Nazis in official power and control in Germany. The point I'm making here is that it was 100% at the time accepted by the people of Germany as the anarchists did this. The official narrative was accepted as true. All right. It was true. It has been proven historically to be 100% false. What I'm demonstrating is that there are, in my opinion, just thousands and thousands and thousands of examples in which you can see that a narrative is presented. It is considered 100% true at the time. And we only later come to the understanding that, no, I was duped. I was conned, whatever. The next thing that I wanted to talk about real quickly is the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Are you familiar with that? Okay. Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 was an absolute, not just a false flag, it was an outright lie that American forces were attacked by the North Vietnamese in the Gulf of Tonkin. And what it did was it instigated the United States' formal entrance into the Vietnam War. It resulted in the Gulf of Tonkin resolution by Congress. And at the end of the day, close to 60,000 American men and women were killed in the most horrific division of our country, literally since the Civil War. It was 100% false. People were jumping up and down the day after the event saying, let's go get them. Sound familiar? 100% false. The next very obvious example would be the JFK assassination. The day after the JFK assassination, and literally for years afterwards, it was literally considered impolite to even talk about it. And the official narrative of Lee Harvey Oswald acting as a single lone gunman was accepted, for a great deal of time. I've heard that polls about United States opinions about the JFK assassination at this point fall in the range of 70% of American citizens believe that the official narrative of the lone gunman is false, and the evidence that it is overwhelming.
Totally.
It absolutely was a false. It was a coup, for one.
It was a coup.
There are many people that argue that whatever pretense of democracy, democratic republic that this country maintained was lost on that day. And
I think that's right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm actually been working on writing something that kind of goes through the whole history of false flags and potential election fraud in the United States and stuff. And I think, as I think about the four kind of biggest ones for setting the stage for where America is today, I'd be curious to get your thoughts. But I really come to the economic panic that led to the Federal Reserve, then the JFK assassination, 9/11, and COVID, right? And at each moment of these major kind of societal changing false flags, you saw this cabal be able to consolidate more and more power of more and more influential organizations.
I have a difficult time disagreeing with you about that. I mean, not that I would want to, but people don't talk about the unbelievable importance of the financial economic coup that was completed by the creation of the Federal Reserve. The American citizenry has always been economically enslaved, but it was a massive step forward for the elitists, for the cabal, when they created the Federal Reserve. The other issues you just talked about, are the clear, shining examples of a virtual century of this totalitarian tiptoe, as it were, to this horrific one world government and things of that nature. Something that is important to understand is that, from my perspective and a lot of other people's perspective that hold that this cabal does exist, number one, they are very intelligent. They are not creative, but they are very intelligent, and their planning is generational. They're not planning for next week. They literally are planning, for decades, even centuries in advance. It's incredible.
And on that note, I think that's why we've been seeing the censorship ramp up so much in the last few years, is that I think people have been catching on to them faster than they were expecting. And so they've almost had to kind of fast forward some of their plans to try and cover, what is almost like this dam that's breaking at an ever increasing pace, if you will.
I agree, because again, the term that's often used was totalitarian tiptoe.
I love that phrase.
And it's not that anymore. It's a totalitarian sprint.
You're right. Totally.
And it is. They've shown their hand. They've shown in a way that they never have in the past.
You're right, because my awakening happened during COVID, but it wasn't about COVID, right? It was about the ET phenomenon in the military-industrial complex. Okay. And once I was awakened to that, then I just look at, hey, what is Robert Malone saying about what's going on with COVID? And then you just start to see all of these dots connect so quickly.
I'll talk about that in a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you look at almost any official narrative about any institution, political issue, phenomenon, anything that you look at that is accepted as, well, everybody knows that, fill in the blank. It's incredible, Jordan, that to look at almost any issue from an official narrative perspective, it doesn't take very long at all to start to understand that this has major holes in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll talk about this in just a moment, but I'll just talk about it right now. The COVID narrative is falling apart. I think we all, agree with that. There is still in my opinion, far too many of the population that are continuing to take the shot, et cetera, continuing to comply, and for lack of a better term, not only are people being injured and actually dying from this, this experimental gene therapy that is, not a vaccine.
Yeah,
I would be willing to actually go so far as to call it a genocide. You may not be willing to understand or not understand. You may not be willing to accept that at this point.
Sure.
If you extrapolate numbers and look at things, it can be argued at this point that to date, 20 million people worldwide have died from the COVID vaccine.
Yeah,
that to me is an unbelievable amount of people. It really is. So the other thing I wanted to comment on is that when you look at the JFK assassination as an example, it is not 100% accepted that the official narrative is false, but it's pretty high. It's like 70, 75%. With 9/11, I don't know, but
probably lower for sure.
It's definitely lower.
Definitely lower.
Yeah, it's probably in the 20 to 50% range.
Yeah,
probably closer to 50, and maybe not, an understanding of everything that went on.
Right. But I think they compound on one another, right? Because once you recognize that there's shenanigans that happened with JFK and that they've only gotten worse over the subsequent decades, it becomes easier to draw those parallels and tell that coherent story.
Exactly. I would argue that there's a direct correlation between the event that happens and then time. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Are you familiar with the SPARS exercise that was done by connected to Johns Hopkins? Similar to Event 201.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I think Robert Kennedy mentioned it in his book.
I think it was maybe 2018.
Okay.
But it was effectively the COVID scenario. And it, if you look at it, it is fictional. They are using it, quote, as an exercise, and they agree and admit that it is a fictional what if. Okay, but its parallels to COVID are stunning. It's like they may have known something. There's a Fauci character. There's a you name it. There's all of the all of these characters and
all the cartoon character villains.
Absolutely, and
the full cast, the games,
the full cast, exactly, and the pharmaceutical, the corruption and involvement. It's really quite telling, because what they do is they get to the point where the vaccines are killing people, okay, and that it is no longer deniable, that it's undeniable that this is happening. And I find it interesting, and so they throw, for example, the Fauci character under the bus, and they do various things. And if I'm here today to talk to people about the fact that the ultimate goal of the COVID psyop had nothing to do with protecting us against sickness. It was to get us injected with this this gene therapy, and they address that in this SPARS documentation, or this SPARS exercise. And the point I'm trying to make is we're just starting. All right. We're just starting to see the results, the devastation and the death from this shot, and we don't know long term. 2 years from now, 5 years from now,
right?
So on and so forth.
And in the meantime, people are taking more boosters. It's crazy.
You got that right. It is crazy. It is crazy, but it's easy, and I'm guilty of this, especially early on. It's easy to become frustrated and angry with these people, and to think of them in a negative way, especially when they're attacking you, and we're the crazy
You don't
ones.
get the vaccine, you're killing us all. You're killing my baby and my grandma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the most difficult things to do is to look at these people with compassion, because they are, in fact, victims of an unbelievably orchestrated mind control psyop. And my purpose here at the end of the day is,
there, I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating it must have been for you over these past 35 years, right? When most people weren't waking up. I mean, because I was even, the first year of COVID, I was hook, line, and sinker. I took the first 3 shots.
Did you?
And whatever Fauci said, all that stuff. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, that makes the place you are now even more impressive. As I said from the beginning, when I started talking to you about your podcast, and what I heard the first time I listened to your podcast, it was unbelievably comprehensive, unbelievably perceptive, and it was one of the best things I've ever heard with regard to. Yeah, it was amazing. And I assumed that from the beginning you understood what was going on, and to understand that your waking up process came as a result of and during COVID is incredible.
Yeah, there was a lot of synchronicities. I think my whole life was moving me towards that. I just didn't necessarily consciously know it until then.
These issues of consciousness and the role of whatever you want to call, our creator, if you believe in that, or God, or whatever, or one thing I've learned in the 35 years I've been looking at these issues, without question, is that there are no coincidences. There aren't. And, I've been put in positions where, I can't, it's like, this is what I was born to do. I don't make any money. I'm not looking to make any money, but it's given me a purpose in life, to try to, do whatever small part I can to help people understand that, there is a malevolent force in this world that is, for lack of it, they want to kill you. They want to kill you.
I mean, you're absolutely right about the depopulation stuff, and and it's like people. That's an easy place, I think, to start poking holes in their story, right? Because people have gotten tricked into, oh, we have 8 billion people, no more, we're stressing the planet. But it's like, guys, breathe for a second. 100 people, 100 total people have as much wealth as the bottom 4 billion in the world, right? Think about that. Gandhi said, we have enough for every man's need, but not enough for every man's greed. And it's absolutely unbelievable how greedy the top of this stack has been. And even if you don't believe in the idea of there being a cabal, them having evil intents, or being tied to Satanism, whatever, you have to recognize that the economic inequality is just unfathomable. And it's crazy that we've let it get to this point.
It's reprehensible.
It is.
In point of fact, it's actually pretty much the historical narrative of economic inequity from the beginning of time. The royals, the kings, the elites, it's always been, the peasants, the elites, and everybody else.
John, have you thought about, starting your own podcast, or,
I have
a blog or something?
I have. I've thought about it a lot, and it's real possible that I will start one.
I think you should. I think people are ready for, you were definitely ahead of your time, probably, and I'm sure that came with its own complications in your own life. But I definitely people are ready to hear it.
Yeah, I've Zach talked about this a little bit. I'm not here to talk about my personal life, as it were, but I've struggled with drugs and alcohol abuse, in my life, to the point where it has affected me in an incredibly negative way, in many ways, familial, legal, all of these things. And it has taken me literally, I believe, until now almost, not that I haven't been sober for long periods of time. I have for long periods of time, but I was too concerned with those issues and the effects and the ramifications and all the things that happen because of them, to ever get myself in a position where I thought I had a life's purpose. And being sober for quite some time now, it's really crystal clear to me that there will be something that will present itself in my life that will allow me to make this particular passion that I have, this particular calling I believe I have, part of a more tangible reality.
Yeah.
There's no question. There's no question in my mind. You talk about no coincidences. Zach, says you need to listen to Jordan's podcast. I'm like, what podcast? I didn't know he had a podcast. Well, what's it about? He tells me it's like, yeah, I'm a little interested.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like, I thought you might be. Yeah. So the purpose of what I'm doing, in terms of how it might extend to the greater humanity, is just not clear yet. But again, even me talking to you today and being put together in this situation, I believe is for a reason. I think it's going to lead to something.
I totally agree.
You know what I mean?
And it even gets into your question earlier about, have I lost friends and folks? And there's definitely been, certain friends that I don't keep in touch with as much lately, and I'm sure it's in partly due to this, right? But I don't begrudge them that at all, right? Everyone's, in their own reality, everyone's at their own level of consciousness. But then on the flip side, what I think about is putting out these thoughts, these ideas, having these types of conversations that are very taboo in most of society. It resonates with the people who it resonates with, and it's brought you into my life to have this conversation, right? So that's what I try to focus on.
Absolutely. One of the things that I haven't talked about a lot today is something that I was so struck by initially when I listened to your podcast, is that generally speaking, the woke agenda, for lack of a better term, is generally associated with people of your generation and younger.
Yeah, I was definitely part of it for sure.
Yeah, and like we were talking about feminism earlier, the core issues of the woke agenda are hard to argue with. Who doesn't want equality? Who doesn't want acceptance of be who you are, and so on and so forth. It's just that the dark social engineering that's going on with the woke agenda is the real purpose of it, and it's incredibly dark. It's very dark. It's directly linked to transhumanism, which is an issue we're not even going to talk about today, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that has been done is that within the woke agenda, and I don't mean to stereotype everyone. I don't, but stereotypes do exist for a reason. And there's always outliers and whatnot. But I've been a drum teacher, as an example, for years and years and years. I speak in front of groups very comfortably and easily. I consider myself a teacher. And I'm beginning to wonder if, like so many people of my age, many are fully on board with the COVID official narrative and stuff. But if you're going to find people that are distrustful of the government and are, open to these types of issues, it's more generally, I hate to say it, people that are older, they've seen the Kennedy assassination. They've seen if, can you swear on this? Do you care if I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, they've seen the fuckery. Okay, they've seen the government malfeasance for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And
they've also, I think, seen through more of the hollow words, right? Because I think that's where, like, I even think about, folks that I know who are very smart and still posting all the woke stuff from the Democratic Party. And it's like, when do we look at what the politicians are actually doing, right? Not these kind of hollow phrases, and what is actually happening with inflation, and why are we sending all this money to Ukraine? Meanwhile, we're defunding police and there's homeless people overrunning all of our cities, right? Like, where is the just
common sense, sanity?
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. I find it amazing, frankly. I don't vote. And I get a lot of flack for that a lot of times. How can you change anything if you don't participate? And it's my belief that the system is is theater. It's total theater. There's no president in the history of our country, in my opinion, that has become president through voting. It is whoever is president has been placed there by the elite. Okay. The election fraud, voter fraud, whatever you want to call it, is only used when they need it, so to speak. But believe me, these most recent elections are not the only ones that have been, fixed, as it were, over the years. Whoever's in office is because that's who the elite want to be in office.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about. And I hope I'm not interfering your flow too much, but
not at all.
One of the topics I've had to really reconsider in my whole journey is President Trump, right? And what happened there, right? Because I do now in hindsight recognize he was spot on about a lot of the rot and the corruption and the swamp of DC, right? So I have to also recognize that, when I first came across him, it was out of the lens of the media echo chamber, which I was fully engrossed in. I thought he was just the worst, right? So I never gave him a chance to actually hold him accountable to his actions. And I've seen even in this spirituality community a bit of a split where some folks still think he just won't give him a chance. Others think he actually was a great man. I'm actually maybe more of the opinion that he's a deep coordinated opposition play, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard. So I would just love to get your thoughts.
Generally speaking, we can talk about this a little bit. I'm sorry to say this, but all presidents, all influential politicians around the world at this level, prime ministers, whatever you want to call it, they're all scumbags. Okay, they are all part of this cabal, or part of the elite,
or at least under their control. Right? It's hard to say how directly, where they are in this weird hierarchy of evil.
There's often an argument made that kind of like the mafia, there are competing forces.
That's what I think is going on too.
Yeah, the five families of New York, generally speaking, they're in business, and they cooperate and they do business with each other and all of these things. But every once in a while, they go to war.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's potentially any different among the cabal. I think generally speaking, it's very coordinated, and the funnel gets very narrow at the top. But I'm not 100% convinced of this, but it's my general opinion that Trump is simply a different form of gangster, a competing, family, as it were, potentially. At the same time, what Trump did was, in my opinion, absolutely intentional. Okay. The result of Trump's presidency and his demonization, by the press and all of these things, was to create a rift in this country that has not been seen since the Civil War.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what I find fascinating, again, we talked about the fact that these elites, don't sell them short. Don't take this for granted. They know what they're doing in terms of social control, social engineering. And it's my opinion that Trump was placed there on purpose. Okay. Yeah. Whatever has leaked out with regard to Trump's personal views and opinions has been pretty ugly. If we're talking about grabbing a woman's vagina and, that's who this guy is. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he has deep ties to Epstein. We know that.
It's unbelievable. He is absolutely as dirty as anybody else. Okay.
Sure.
And, he, what is it? Warp speed to get the vaccines. I mean, people, conservatives that support Trump as this bastion of, sanity and all of these things, but he pushed the agenda of COVID as much as Biden did.
That's true. Although I guess to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? It's possible that he didn't understand how deep the corruption was, or that how multifaceted it was.
You can give him that benefit of the doubt, and you're welcome to do so. I don't.
Yeah, fair enough. I think you're right. I think I want to hope that, maybe we've had some more political leadership that's not purely corrupt, but I think to your point, it's just the baseline assumption is that anyone who makes it to president of the United States is up to some very dirty tricks.
We talked about this earlier, killing our heroes. What amazes me, this is these are my opinions, but they are informed opinions. I believe that participating in this charade of our political, system is exactly what they want. We talked about it earlier. The oldest strategy in the world that has worked since time immemorial is divide and conquer. We have never been more divided from a political perspective, from an ideological perspective. It amazes me that every 4 years, the American public, becomes frenzied about the issues and the positions of these various candidates. I know you're younger than me, but name one that has ever fulfilled their political promises. They're whores. They will tell you anything, and they will create a position that, if they can get enough support from this position, allegedly they're elected. But anyway, one thing I wanted to talk about was, in my opinion, one of the most ingenious things that I think the cabal has done with regard to the COVID propaganda. And they have done an amazing job of attaching the vaccine and getting the vaccine and the official COVID narrative to the woke agenda, to the point that I would argue that virtually anybody who is immersed in the woke agenda in some way in their personal life is 98% vaccinated, and is the ones that are saying that, you're killing grandma if you don't, and so on and so forth. But even more than that, if you're anti-vax, which is I am anti-vax, absolutely, but that word has been weaponized. What an anti-vaxxer means really is that you're a MAGA Republican, you're a Trump supporter, you are, blah, 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 blah. You are the opposite of the left. You are, and I wouldn't vote for either one.
You're the other.
I'm no Trump supporter. In fact, I'm not a participant, because I know that it is completely false. Trump was a trump card,
Yeah,
and
I mean, and I think he's playing the exact Hitler character, right? This cabal was funding the Weimar Republic just as they funded Hitler to come in, and I think that's exactly what they're setting us up for him to come in. I think that they're trying to have a lot of our main cities become just pure chaos, right? That's why you're seeing all these police departments defunded, and George Soros being his insane self, right? And then Trump can come in, say, I'm going to put all the criminals away, but I have to have full, powers to do so.
Absolutely. Oh, I was going to talk a little bit about the Hegelian dialectic of the illusion.
That'd be great. Yeah.
The illusion of choice. I'm going to assume you're familiar with this, that what a Hegelian dialectic is.
But I think it'd be great if you would explain it. That'd be awesome.
Sure. Obviously it's directly related to the philosopher Hegel, but at its core, what it means, or what it points to, is that as a governing agency or a governing power, we will allow you to have a choice. But it's not a real choice. It's a false choice. Hegelian dialectic is, you can vote for Biden or you can vote for Trump, and there is this illusion that there's a difference between the two. At the end of the day, there's not. And not only that, but it's a choice that is created and given to you by the actual, powers that be in the first place. Okay, this illusion of choice is amazing to me. How people become, like I said, every 4 years, this whole frenzy of stuff, about
right.
And
the argument becomes abortion or no abortion, not how do we make a society where people aren't having unwanted children, right? How do we make a society where kids can get adopted by loving parents in the event that does happen, right? Like, why has the whole conversation been so shifted to these such divisive topics?
Well, in my opinion, it's a very simple answer. It's divide and conquer. Okay, it's divide and conquer. Distract, divide, inflame, emotion, 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 emotion. And what's the first thing that happens when you have emotion is your, critical thinking skills go out the window and you fight. In the meantime, they are tearing down, the United States of America. To get back to the point of, I know what it was going to be. You were discussing how, politicians don't live up to their promises, and we were discussing that and stuff like that. One of the things that I think it's really important to understand, and it's a pretty easy thing to understand, is that if we're talking about a cabal that is wants to install a government that is one world, one overreaching entity, the United States must be destroyed. It simply must. We can't
I was thinking a lot about that. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, that's okay.
I was thinking about that earlier today. Like, when you talk about the cabal's influence being here from day one, right? This isn't a new phenomenon. I think that the United States was always meant to be a temporary government, right? Where they could talk about all of these ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity, right? And give you some perceived freedoms, right? But at the same time, they always made sure they controlled enough of the system that they would be able to continue consolidating power, right? So that you could use this new system to break the United States away from the powers of English colonialism, but you still subjugated them to the powers of economic oligarchy. And then over the ensuing 250 years, you just continue to infiltrate more and more organizations. You then start to destroy the family unit, et cetera, and all these things that we're talking about.
It's often noted that this plan for total dominance and control on a worldwide level is, I believe, referred to within the cabal as the Great Work. A lot of the work that the eugenicists of the early 20th century did to advance that particular agenda, as an example, they're never going to live to see. John D. Rockefeller, one of the most heinous individuals in the history of the world, and somebody that has more influence on today's social engineering through the Rockefeller Foundation, never lived to see these things. They work the long plan, absolutely. So you're right. Freeing ourselves, from the British monarchy, again, in my opinion, is just an illusion. We're still run by the English system. There's totally. The elite are effectively just descendants of the royal oligarchy that existed in the first place. All right. Yeah. Again, it's a Hegelian dialectic. It absolutely is. It's this illusion that there are two separate entities, England, United States. At the end of the day, all borders, all countries, all divisions along political lines are an illusion. Like the mafia, they work together at the top. There is no difference between, Russia and the United States at that level. And in fact,
KGB, CIA.
Yeah. In fact, I would argue that they foment this, they create this, the Cold War, wars in general, to serve the agenda of constant fear, constant anxiety, and to make money. You talked about it earlier. American bankers supported and funded the Russian Revolution. American bankers supported, funded both sides of World War I and both sides of World War II. And, we go in and bomb the shit out of Afghanistan after, post 9/11. Who goes in and reconstructs? It's, Brown and Root, the Carlyle Group, so on and so forth. It's just money, 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 money. It never ends. So anyway, just to get back to a little bit about what I was talking about, when we look at these false flags, that's where we get stopped. The official narrative is always accepted as absolutely true. In some cases, the narrative is overturned early. In some cases, it takes a long time. But when you look at almost any historical event, you can understand who benefited, que bono, however you say it, who benefits, and it will always serve the cabal. Is it fair? Is it reasonable, if you're on the fence about these things, to at least come to the conclusion that governments lie? They lie to us. And I've heard so often, in the case of 9/11, as one example, and in the case of COVID, is, yeah, they lied to us about this. They lied to us about Kennedy. They lied to us about, whatever the issue might be. They lied about this. They lied about that. They lied about this, so on and so forth. But they're not lying about this.
Right.
Where does that, what logical sense does that possibly make? Is it a fair conclusion to understand that our governments are gangsters, that they're liars, and they're out for a grand agenda that's incredibly dark? I'm, very concerned, very concerned. The other thing to understand is that in all cases, acceptance of the official narrative of any government position is, again, based solely on perception. Who creates that perception? All right, who creates that perception? We've talked about COVID a little bit more than I had intended to initially, but what I wanted to do was take a look at some facts that you've already covered, but I wanted to try to keep it as simple as possible. There is still a great number of people that are wearing masks, that are continuing to take boosters. I don't know about you, but I personally know more than about, I think I can name 4 people that I know are kind of in my life in a way, and things of that nature, that have had a severe adverse reaction from either their first vaccine or their first booster, and have gone back and got it again. It's incredible to me that there is still a sizable amount of the population that is under this mind control. So I just wanted to quickly go through a few facts. One of the things that it's incredibly important to understand is that this psyop has absolutely centered around divide and conquer, and is centered around distraction, obfuscation, confusion, and an unbelievable increase in gaslighting. I'm sure you're familiar with what gaslighting is. Okay, I'm going to guess most of the listeners are understand what gaslighting is as well. But the bottom line on just a few COVID facts is that it is and these are the CDC's numbers, it's 99.7 or greater percent survivable. 99.7 or greater percent survivable. Okay, if you do nothing. All right. The median death age of COVID is 81. All right. The initial official position on the vaccine was that it would give you immunity and it would prevent transmission. That is easily proven. You were told, take the vaccine and you're protected, and you will not give it to anybody else. That has been, there are 1,000 different examples of official statements that say that. We now know that the vaccine does not prevent immunity or provide immunity or prevent transmission. And yet, are you familiar with the Orwellian concept of doublethink from 1984?
I've heard the term, but I don't know much about
it. What a prescient book. It's a book that literally every person on the planet should read. But doublethink is this concept that you can hold 2 contradictory concepts in your mind as true, okay, at the same time. Literally as true at the same time. And so what I just said is that it's known, it's proven that the vaccine, and we need to quit calling them vaccines. They're experimental gene therapy. All right. Yeah. They're a bioweapon. The vaccine does not
provide. Was COVID itself. Let's not
of course
about
it was.
That.
Yeah, of course it was. If you do nothing, the chances of surviving COVID, if you get it, I don't want to get into the rabbit hole of whether or not I'm skeptical as to whether COVID even exists. I think it's highly possible that the flu was simply rebranded. Okay. I don't, that's a rabbit hole. We don't need to get into it. But the bottom line is that by the CDC's own numbers, if you do nothing, you are 99.7% assured that you're not going to die from COVID. All right. Anybody under the age of really a 40 has a statistical chance of this, essentially zero. If you're less than 15 years old, your chance of dying from COVID is zero. All right. And it doesn't, so it doesn't provide immunity, the vaccine, and it doesn't prevent transmission. Yet, the official position of the government is still that the vaccine is critical to ending the pandemic.
It's crazy. It makes no sense.
You know, how can you hold? And many people hold that position.
Most, I'd say, probably still do today.
That support the narrative. Yeah. You know, and how that's, if there's evidence of mind control, if you want an example of mind control, I can think of no stronger one than that.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, John.
Sure.
I was talking to a friend about this about a week ago. Do you think that COVID was meant to be more deadly than it was? And we just, I don't know, maybe there was some type of divine intervention or something, but it feels like that might have happened.
The argument can be made. That gets into my personal feeling is that it was not. Okay. My personal feeling is that this was, like all of their agendas, it's always a spectrum, right? It's a continuum.
Yeah.
We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to, and it's, in my opinion, more than anything else, the absolute objective of COVID was to get the vaccines in people's arms. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But in addition to that, I think it was also to see, you know, just how far they could go with a story. How much mind control can we do on a mass basis?
Right.
And what can we get people to do and accept?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think Eustace Mullins talks a lot about that, right? Well, they'll like specifically target a specific country, right? And they use Russia as an example for the past 100 years. They've kind of just terrorized the Russian people and tried out all these different things. I think Haiti is another great example. And they roll it out on a greater scale too.
Again, this is just an opinion. It's a great question, and I have difficulty answering it. Nobody really knows the answer to that. What I tend to believe in this example is that, and they're already talking about it, there's another one coming.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's another one coming.
Bill Gates' most recent book.
Absolutely. You know,
it's like they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
I think that they've made a lot of mistakes and whatnot, but overall, they pulled this off. I mean, they pulled it off. They were successful, and
fair.
Their population or depopulation agenda does have to be served. Okay. One of the reasons that I think it's possible that it was not as deadly as they might want it to be, and this is just an argument. It's not you know, it doesn't necessarily prove the point, but they can't control the spread of, you know, a bioweapon, as it were.
That's a fair point.
That's, you know, the people that they want to die or they want to get this are one thing, but, you know, how do you protect the cabal, you know?
Right, sure.
It could get away from you, so to speak.
Sure.
That's again, fair. What they could control is they could control the vaccine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't need to kill people with a virus, a pandemic, when we can just kill them with a vaccine. And when we do that, we can control, you know, who gets it, who doesn't.
Right.
We can. It's argued that you know, they focus on particular populations. There's been, you know, the African American community, as an example, is, you know, in the United States is probably the most vaccine hesitant of all subdivisions of our society for good reason.
Exactly. Yeah.
They've seen this game before,
They've
right?
seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
These men speak with false tongue, man. The Americans know too.
You got that right. So based on those reasons, I think that it was almost irrelevant whether or not COVID was killing people or not. They certainly created the illusion that it was.
Right. And I think also even just this vaccine, right? It's all the ancillary. There's now all this additional surveillance. They've created this mentality where you start to accept whatever health agents tell you to do. So you have to take the next vaccine, and you have to be more, vitriolic to your neighbor who doesn't take the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera. It just kind of continues that escalation.
Absolutely. I've talked about that these psyops, they serve multiple agendas. Mm-hmm. One of the issues that I had meant to talk about that I haven't talked about is this one. We are programmed to cede, CEDE, to give away our authority at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
We are sovereign individuals, okay? And when you're talking about things like your body, your medical decisions and stuff like that, I can't think of anything that's more intimate and more important with regard to that. And yet, when authority presents us with ultimatums and things of this nature, people just bent over. People just gave it up. It's unbelievable to me. I think the first part of this psyop was more kind of oriented in that way. What can we do? How much can we manipulate the will of the people to do things that are against their own best interest?
Sure.
We're not at the end of this by a long stretch. This is the beginning. Vaccine passports, restrictions of travel, surveillance. You already mentioned it. These are the much larger agendas that are being fulfilled. When you ask yourself, and I'm asking the audience to do the same thing, when you look at the fact that Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are essentially police states, in a way. Are you familiar with those issues? Yeah. In the name of your health, right. It's farcical. It's ridiculous if you believe that. And you mentioned something that's very important. All of these other attacks on our freedoms and things of that nature, our rights and whatnot, once they're gone, they never give them back.
Yeah.
We're still taking our shoes off at airports.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Department of Homeland Security is never going to go away. And it was created specifically because of 9/11, right? 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Just do it for 2 weeks. We're 3 years into this thing. Just 2 weeks, right? When they take away, they never give back.
Yeah.
Ever. I know we've gone along maybe.
Yeah, let me, and unless you want to get it, if you had anything else, I did want to ask you, having researched this for so long and clearly, for good reason, lacking confidence in the existing system, of figuring out a solution. What is the best path forward for us? How do we fix this?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Any thoughts I've heard this, from a lot of people in this community. Any thoughts about armed revolution, violent opposition, and things like that are, in my opinion, futile. We have no ability to, fight the military, as it were, even though we, have guns and whatnot. I think it's what they want.
It is,
because that gives them the excuse to just go full on lockdown, right? Full on police state. Here's what I'll say about this. Short term, I am very pessimistic about our future. All right. However, the truth, the light, whatever you want to call it, it just has this way of, the truth will out. It has a way of surviving. I think we're in for some real hard times. But I think at the end of the day, I think this whole plan, this whole enterprise is just unsustainable for any long period of time. All empires collapse. The Soviet Union is no more. You know what I mean? And that it took less than 100 years. It's just not sustainable.
It's not.
But in the short term, it's going to get ugly, I think. So to answer your question specifically, the first thing I would say is simply this: say no. Say no.
Yeah.
Stop taking vaccine or taking boosters. Say no. All right. Stop wearing masks. I don't care what happens. I will not wear a mask. I don't care if it means that I can't fulfill my doctor's appointment today. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I say no. All right. Simple, Gandhi-esque, nonviolent opposition is really, in my opinion, the only viable options that we have.
I agree.
In addition to that,
non-cooperation. I mean, that's, you said Gandhi. I mean, that's what Martin Luther King preached, and that's what works. That's the one way to institute social change. And also, we don't want social change that just results in more violence, more anarchy, some other asshole taking over the head of the world infrastructure instead of who we've got today. You know what I mean? And I think the only way to do that is to achieve a spiritual evolution as a human society that says we're going to get rid of weapons, we're going to get rid of nuclear weapons, right? That like these centralized forms of government and forms of economy, they lend themselves to corruption, and we're not going to stand for it. That we can do better. We recognize the root of the issues, and that we're going to figure out a way to systemically move forward and fix them.
I agree. What I find is that the manifestations of this agenda and this literal war that is, being undertaken right now, manifests in, the areas of politics and the economy and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But in my opinion, we haven't even gotten into the spiritual makeup of these psychopaths. And it's a whole podcast of it, in itself.
Sure.
But
maybe we do a follow-up at some point and get into that. I think it's a dark topic, but I think it's one that would benefit from having some more accurate reporting.
I know quite a bit about it, and there's several ways we could go about it, and I could make some suggestions with regard to it.
Let's talk about it more offline, but that'd be cool.
Sure. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make here at the end of the day is that I think people really need to understand, this is a war. You are under attack, and it is not a standard war. And while it manifests itself in terms of political, economic, and other consequences to us, make no mistake about it, this is a spiritual war. Mm-hmm. It's a spiritual war. It's good versus evil. All right. I don't care what perspective you have on, what religious belief you might have, or, what you hold from that perspective, but this is good versus evil. This is a spiritual war. And to answer your question again that you asked before, I don't, nonviolent noncompliance, stop listening to or giving credence to anything from the mainstream, media. All right. If you want to continue to watch TV, understand that TV programming is called programming for a reason. All right. Even the name of TV, tell a vision. Whose vision are they telling? Okay. It's the same with history. History is written by the winners, and it is his story. It's not ours. Stop participating in the political system on a national level. The only options that we have, and there's been some really uplifting and positive examples of local political activism that is really changing things at that level.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think the psychedelics movement is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. The homesteading, the bear movement, if you understand what that's all about, things
I'm
of
not
that nature.
familiar.
Essentially, it's people homesteading, providing all of the things that they need to survive within a very small community.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you should look into it. There's a lot of it going on. That essentially they're leaving the system as much as you possibly can. You know, as much as you possibly can.
Sure.
The discussion of the spiritual war that we just had, one of the things that really needs to be discussed within that issue is the understanding of and the possibilities contained within the concept of anarchy. Okay. Anarchy is a word that has been weaponized and is completely misunderstood by 99.999% of the people. Anarchy is not Molotov cocktail throwing extremists. Anarchy simply means no government. All right. Doesn't mean no rule, no order, but that's what it's been weaponized to believe.
Or at least, as limited of a government as possible, right? I mean, isn't that, the phrase, the government is best that governs least?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And getting back to this issue of the spiritual war, I think at the core of this, it's my spiritual belief, and we haven't talked about my spirituality at all, or my religious or whatever concepts, but I think that the one thing that the cabal is most afraid of, and as a result, all of the propaganda that's out there, and it is so widespread and so wide reaching that it's a completely different show. But as a taken in total, I think the ultimate agenda of all of this propaganda is that we are being propagandized to believe that we are nothing but an insignificant speck on an insignificant speck in a universe of unbelievable size, that we mean nothing. All right. The fact is, individually, that we have no power, that we are nothing. We're a pure accident. It's incredible that
the universe itself is an accident that's drifting into nothingness.
Exactly. And it's indifferent to us.
Yep.
And it's indifferent.
If anything, it's maybe hostile to us.
Absolutely. Right. I think the truth is that we are beings of incredible power. We are far greater in number than this cabal. The percentage proportion is unbelievable.
That's why depopulation is so critical to their agenda.
Absolutely. It's a big part of that agenda, without question. Everything in our modern society is designed to let you think, believe, be programmed to accept that you are of no importance,
right?
In the grand scheme of things. When it's my belief that we are exactly the opposite. I think it's the biggest thing that they are afraid of. Okay. Yeah. An issue that comes up sometimes is this: there is no, I'll wrap things up here, but there is no question that the cabal has an incredible amount of power. They have all the wealth. They have all the influence. They have captured every single institution that exists in this world. Why? What's this obsession with this total dominance of essentially the human spirit? What is it? All right. It is spiritual in nature. Okay. It is spiritual in nature. But related to that is they are, you can't argue. They are incredibly powerful. They own everything. They have the military and all this. So the question remains, why don't they just tomorrow come out and say, it's over? Everybody's locked down. These are the laws. You don't have the right to this. You don't have, you're done. This is it. We're done. Why don't they just enact this, police state tomorrow? Why? What's with this game, this gaslighting and the tiptoe and this 2,000-year process to bring about this. Why is that? It's my belief that were they to do that human beings would discover the power that they do have.
Totally, I agree.
And I'm talking about spiritual, literal, paranormal issues that are involved here. I don't know if you're a Christian. I'm not pushing Christianity here in any way. Okay, I'm not. Anyway, I just wanted to point to one example from the Bible that I think is an illustration of the type of power that people have, and that's what's known as the Transfiguration. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is. Essentially, it's in Matthew, and it is Christ takes two of his disciples onto a mountaintop and essentially transforms himself into a being of light.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm certainly familiar with like the concept of dematerialization, right, and light bodies. And I think as you look at the spiritual literatures, I mean, these phenomenon are very real that people tapped into all throughout the ages. Unquestionably.
And we are a species with amnesia. We don't understand the power that we have. So from that perspective, that was kind of what I was alluding to in terms of being optimistic long term. These powers dwell within us. Okay. If you believe in any form of creator, I don't care who it is, you don't have to be Christian, you don't have to be Muslim, whatever you can, but if you have any belief whatsoever that you are not just the accidental byproduct of a bunch of biology and chemistry and things like that, that you are the product of an intelligent design, that intelligent design has given you far more power than you think you have.
I think you're right, and that makes sense, right? Because they figured their destruction of the human spirit had to be so total, so complete that we would never fight back, and they could force us into this transhumanist, technocratic future. But I think to your point about it now being a authoritarian sprint or whatever, right? It's like one of my favorite lines from Kathy O'Brien is she always says, the bad guys have already lost, they just don't know it yet. I think
that's a biblical perspective as well. That's a bit, totally. And I do agree with that. I agree with what she's saying. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable in the long term. It is. The truth will out. The light always, triumphs, as it were. And again, I'm not referring to that in any religious perspective. I'm not. So that's the best answer I have. I think
that's a great answer.
I think the one answer that must be avoided at all costs is any form of violent opposition. And again, I think that's exactly what they want.
I agree, and that's my biggest hang up with Trump is he is all fire and brimstone, lock away the criminals, right? Like more police state type stuff. Build out the Space Force, blah blah blah.
On a personal, kind of note, one of the, we do live in dark times, and I am, pessimistic with regard to the short term that it could get really ugly. I mean, we could be talking about famine. We could be talking about complete economic collapse.
People don't recognize that hyperinflation can happen anywhere.
Oh yeah. But again, I am optimistic on the long term. But I will say this, because of the work I do, because of the opinions I hold, it's like you said before, I can see them coming a million miles away. I have never spent one single second of this pandemic hoax afraid. You know what I mean? Now, is there fear about the future with the result of this thing? Yes, to a certain degree. But what I'm talking about is I know so many people. I heard somebody describe it on a podcast just the other day that was just perfect, that literally wrap themselves in saran wrap, go into their house with 3 masks, live in there, don't talk to anybody, don't invite anybody, have separated themselves from society and live 100% from the time of waking to the time they go to sleep, and then they have nightmares at night in fear. Okay, we're facing a staunch enemy. We are, but at the same time, from day one, I have never ever had 1 second of fear that I'm going to die from this stupid virus. Okay, never once. I knew from the second that towers came down that I knew what was going on there. Okay, I have never been afraid of terrorism and so on and so forth. I don't live that way. It's all contrived. It's all manufactured. And if you do just that, this is a little bit of an extension on the answer to the question you gave me before. If you do just that, it's amazing how fulfilling your life can be, even in the midst of all this bullshit. Okay. I have a wonderful wife, someone I love deeply and dearly. And we, frankly, I don't make a lot of money. I'm retired essentially, and so on and so forth. But I could give a crap. I've never been happier. Okay. And I don't spend my days. I spend an awful lot of time researching these issues, but I don't take them home at night. I don't sit at home at night just fretting and worrying about this stupid COVID. I have people in my family that basically like attracts like, frequency, vibration. You talked about it before. It attracts itself, right? And I have multiple members of my family that live in this COVID world, this fear, this whole thing, and everybody in their life is involved with that, and as a result, it's this constant fear, catastrophe, emergency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't live that way. I don't. And it doesn't affect me in that way. It doesn't. It truly doesn't. So,
well, that's great. And I think that's a good message for the listeners too, right? Is that a lot of the things that we talked about, if you haven't just dismissed both of us as total lunatics at this point, if you start to approach them with a fresh mind, with, starting to maybe follow some of the research that John or I have come across and that have led us to build these convictions, right? That it can be really challenging to recognize how deeply you've been deceived, how effective propaganda is when it happens every single day of your life from birth till death. But on the other side of that, dark realization, because look, nobody likes to be duped, right? There's a line I love that it's like, it's easier to trick somebody than to convince them they've been tricked. But
that was the next thing that was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah,
no, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's an unbelievable phenomenon that people absolutely, all con artists know that, and they use it to their advantage. It is much easier to con somebody than it is to get them to admit to themselves or others that they have been conned, and they will defend the con to the end. Is in many cases. You do have to take a little bit. There's nothing wrong. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I should have. When it comes to all the things that I've studied extensively, I've formed, opinions about them, right? I am certain, positive that there are things that I'm wrong about. I'm wrong. I have changed my mind. I've changed my position on numerous things over the years. Okay. Belief is the enemy of knowing. When you continue to maintain a dogmatic position in the face of ever-increasing contradictory information to that, that's cult behavior. That's cult belief. That's dogma. That's doing you a disservice. There is nothing wrong ever with saying, I got fooled. They got me on that one. I was wrong. I came to the wrong conclusion. It's incredibly freeing. Everything I've said today, it's my opinion. It's my beliefs based on my perception, which is based on, what I believe to be credible sources. But if that changes, so be it.
Right. Totally. And I think that it's not something anyone should be ashamed of, especially as it relates to the depths of the cabal and what's really going on at the top of the geopolitical system, because this has been their greatest ploy for hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? And so uh everyone's been duped, right? It's fine. Like, it sucks, but then once we recognize that, then we can get over it and figure out how to solve the issue.
The list is endless.
Yeah.
The list is endless of the psyops that we've been subjected to over the centuries, right?
Yep.
And there is nothing wrong with taking a mature, objective approach to the fact that, I'm under influence. Let's just call it that. Forget mind control. I am under influence, and that influence does not have my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
So
that's
what's wrong?
with it.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Wow. Well, John, this has been an awesome conversation. I think we got through most of the notes you wanted to chat about, but anything else that you wanted to touch on before we break for the day?
Well, it's up to you. If I could, 2 more minutes, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I wanted to do this. We've talked about very emotional, very divisive issues today, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that perhaps I would give the listeners a little bit of homework. All right. And what I wanted to do was take a narrative, an official narrative that really in the scheme of things it doesn't really have much effect on your daily life. Okay. Whether you believe this narrative or don't believe it doesn't really matter. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the narrative I've chosen is the narrative of dinosaurs. Okay. I'm going to say it flat out. I don't think dinosaurs exist. I don't think they did exist. Right. It is an accepted narrative throughout the world. There's nobody that doesn't believe that dinosaurs happened, right? Let me give you 2 minutes of simple facts, and then I want people to go through the process of looking at a narrative that they're not emotionally invested in, and coming to their own conclusion. All right. So I've chosen this one because it's not political charged. It's truth or falsity does not really affect how you live on your daily life. Okay. So I don't believe that dinosaurs existed, at least in the manner described. Okay. Sure. Here's some facts to consider regarding the dinosaur narrative. The dinosaur narrative was introduced in the mid 1800s. Okay. About halfway through the century, at the same time, roughly, as the theory of evolution was introduced. The theory of dinosaurs serves the theory of evolution specifically. All right. And prior to this is interesting. Prior to the introduction of the dinosaur narrative, there is no record of any indigenous culture or established culture having ever discovered a dinosaur fossil. I'm talking about the big ones, the T-Rexes, whatever. Trilobites, maybe. A salamander, perhaps, that kind of thing. I'm talking about the big ones that are on display at the Smithsonian and stuff like that. Okay. There's no record of it anywhere. It was only after dinosaurs were, quote, discovered that they began finding these fossils everywhere. Okay. The people in charge of finding these fossils are people like the Royal Society of England, the Smithsonian Institute in the United States, things of that nature. We can get into the corruption involved in those institutions. We don't need to. That's your job. That I'm talking to the listener. So anyway, this is a fact. All dinosaur skeletons on display throughout the world are false, are fake. Excuse me. This is a fact. It's not speculation. It's grudgingly acknowledged by the Smithsonian and other museums. And the official narrative is that they are simply too fragile and precious to be exposed to the public. They don't want 10-year-olds climbing on them and stuff like that, which is, I guess, understandable. But nonetheless, they claim that the real skeletons are in the basement, and yet no skeleton of this type has ever been presented to the public, much less presented to the scientific community to be studied and tested. Okay, never, ever. The fact is that China, a company in China, manufactures virtually all of the skeletons that are on display, and that's easily confirmed. They have a website, a public website. It's a fact. All right. Large dinosaurs such as T-Rexes and Brontosaurus violate the laws of physics. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that. Excuse me, but something to consider is this: oil is known as fossil fuel, right? Okay. Everybody knows that, and I say that facetiously, that oil is dinosaur remains that have somehow transmuted into oil, right? It's a scarce resource, and it is called a fossil fuel for a reason. It's dinosaur
Is that really
remains.
what the narrative of oil is? I didn't realize that.
Oh, okay. You have heard the narrative of fossil fuels, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I just didn't realize that that's literally what the word fossil came from.
Yeah. Well, it can, in this context, yeah. Dinosaur remains somehow transmuted into oil.
Okay? But there's other sources that create oil as well as dinosaurs. Is that fair?
I don't know. Effectively, the official narrative, dinosaurs, oil.
Wow,
that's the official
narrative. Realize that. That's wild. I mean,
absolutely.
Right, that doesn't just seem to hold up just from first gut.
That's absolutely a fact. That is absolute. That's why they're called fossil fuels. Absolutely.
Okay, I'd never knew that. That's wild.
Oh yeah. So first of all, there's no scientific evidence to support the claim that fossils and organic remains can somehow transmute into petroleum. What
about would coal and natural gas? Is those also from dinosaurs?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that's the official narrative. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that.
Okay. I'm
just talking about petroleum. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Anyway, yeah, keep going. This is super fascinating. I've heard a lot of good ones, but I've not heard this one before. So I'm excited to learn more about dinosaurs.
I don't think it'd take a whole lot of research on your part to understand that the fossil part of the equation is directly related to the dinosaur. In fact, I thought that was such common knowledge that I'm a little surprised that you didn't realize that. But
I had no idea.
And that's not an attack on you. I didn't mean it.
No, sure. I'm sure I probably learned it at some point, but just it's not front and center at all.
Yeah, maybe it's an assumption that I'm making that maybe the general public isn't as aware of as I thought. Everybody, of course, understands that oil is called a fossil fuel.
Sure.
That's
I think it's a good point to bring up, right? Because initially, if you think, why would they make up this idea about dinosaurs? Like that's silly, that's crazy. But then you're like, no, it's tied to a very real phenomenon of oil, and this is obviously very critical for our world.
Well, exactly. It's also tied very directly to the theory of evolution.
That's a great point you bring up. Okay. And I'm very critical of Darwin and social Darwinism and everything that his theories have been used for. But anyway.
I'd love to do a podcast on that issue as well as a couple others, but cool. I don't want to be presumptuous. But and the last point I'll make is simply this: this narrative is presented as a fact. Okay, we have oil because dinosaurs existed, and again, just from a common sense perspective, how many billions, even trillions of barrels of oil has mankind consumed since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution? There must have been just a shit ton of dinosaurs. You know what I mean? It must have been just packed, ass to elbow, 20 feet deep. There's no way.
Yeah.
What agendas does it serve? On the other hand, it serves the agenda of evolution. It serves the agenda of the illusion of scarcity. This is a non-renewable resource, okay? And as a result, not only is it scarce, and that can get into the climate agenda, all kinds of things, right? Sure. And in addition to that, we can just charge you out the ass. We can make a lot of money.
Right. And then, every time we manufacture a war, an economic panic, we also have an energy panic too, right?
Of course. So anyway, I want to just end what I was going to talk about today with this. There is a terrific podcast that I really recommend to everybody. And it's we don't have to get into details right now. I'm just going to relate a short anecdote. The name of the podcast is Crow 777. It's CRROW 777. Okay, it's obviously a pseudonym, but he is centered on attacking official narratives. And we're talking about, he's got almost 500 episodes. And this is where the dinosaur issue first came to my attention. Okay. And he made a big deal about it in a way. And there's another reason that he's very famous within this community, but we don't need to get into that right now. But I just find it interesting that he was one of the first to put forth this narrative that dinosaurs never existed. And he made a big deal about it. And about a week after he did this, the National Institute of Science, or whoever is in charge of discovering and naming new species of things, announced that they had discovered a new dinosaur. And the name of the dinosaur was Nodosaurus. And I just find that interesting. No dinosaurs. I think they were mocking him. They it's just it proves nothing. It's just an interesting anecdote. It just is. So anyway, like I said, it's not a heavy subject. Go look at it.
Yeah.
Go
so you're
look at it.
recommending people listen to this podcast and then make up their own minds?
That would be one source of it, yes.
Sure.
But just go look at the official narrative of dinosaurs and see if it makes any sense to you.
Yeah,
you know?
interesting. So then you just started doing some you have your own Google searching and stuff after you listen to this?
All kinds of stuff, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I'll have to check it out. Yeah, it's definitely new to my consciousness, so I'm excited to learn more.
This has been, what we're talking about, it's been pretty heavy and pretty dark and pretty pretty important to the freedom, the liberty, the lives of, the world's population. I just thought, to serve the point I'm trying to make, that official narratives, if you look at almost any official narrative, it's amazing how many of them fall apart. So I said, well, let's just take one that's not politically charged, that's fun or whatever, take a look at it. You will be surprised at what you find. So
I love it. Awesome.
Thanks for giving me the time, Jordan. I was honored to be asked to be on the podcast to begin with.
All right. Well, John, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was just a total blast.
Jordan, again, I was honored, and it was absolutely my pleasure. And I was really happy to do it. I hope I added to the conversation, the general worldwide conversation. I hope I didn't
definitely
anger anybody. So
nope, I love it. I think it's if folks have made it this far, they're at least keeping an open mind to some big topics, and love it.
That's a good point. If they haven't left by now, then they're probably making some headway there.
Totally.
All right.
Well, thanks again. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. This outro will continue with episode 88, The Great Work. As John mentioned in this interview, the Great Work is the cabal's multi-generational plans to lock humanity into rule by one world government. We'll first explore the Great Work in the Great Political Smash, outlining a history of how this nefarious plot has been executed. We begin with an exploration of the Fabian Society, wolves in sheep's clothing, and the deep state's use of gradualism to mold the world to their interests. We'll then dive into the relationship between hierarchy, secrecy, and the ruling organization of the criminal underworld, the Committee of 300. Next, we'll ask whether P heads the Committee of 300. We'll then explore the sordid history of central banks, crisis initiation, organized crime, and war. We'll end the next episode with a discussion of the Great Work and the path of initiation, and a proposal that the Cabal's Great Work was destined to fail, just as good as destined to conquer evil.